Hi, everybody. Welcome to the final Umbraco Codegarden Unconference session for 2021. We've got the last four presenters with us live. Some great questions and comments and suggestions, other thoughts came in. I think we're going to have a really great conversation. I wish we had more than 30 minutes, honestly. So I'm going to try to be well-behaved and play Oprah to the best of my ability. So I'm going to go in order that our talks are broadcast. So I want to start with Henk. Great video, all about accessibility. It really, tied in making not just accessible and inclusive events, but really products. And I think it presented, well, I'll come to what I thought in a second. What I want to ask you, Henk, is how did you first come to understand, learn about, sort of begin, where did your journey with accessibility and inclusivity begin?
Oh yeah, that is a good Umbraco story. I started organizing Dugfest, I think in 2017, correct me if I'm wrong, and that was the first Dugfest. And I was not working at Microsoft at that moment, and we were picking a lineup. And I asked some speakers from Microsoft, hey, can you join our lineup? How cool would that be? And then they came back to me, Henk, you might want to look at your lineup. There is a lack of diversity in your lineup. And then I looked and I was like, yeah, you're right. These are only people that exactly look like me in the lineup. So then I asked the people at Microsoft, at currently the team I'm actually working in now. So I joined that team later on. Like, what can we do about it? And then they helped me with reaching out to diverse speakers, helping to shape it. How can you, where do you find those people? Because like what Floor mentioned, if you put out a CFP, they just don't normally come by just one tweet. So that is where my journey started, and by inviting other and different voices to the conferences and speaking at a lot of other conferences, I learned more and more over the past years.
That's amazing. And I have to also say, what I love about your story is you're talking about reaching out to a team at Microsoft, which you now work for, right? And
Exactly.
Alex was talking all about her career journey and sort of putting yourself out there. And there, here's proof in the pudding, right? You did exactly that. So already we've got kismet and crossover happening. Love it. So I want to also kind of bring together two, I think, threads that we saw with Rahat and Sneha's talks. So Rahat was talking about sort of, thoughts kind of entrapping you at times, right? And Sneha was talking about the box and how you create the box, right? And it's kind of, I don't want to say it's the same thing, but you are kind of talking about the similar principles. And I use this really dirty 4-letter word to talk about this, which is fear. So fear sometimes can be that box and that creator and that thing that sort of entraps your thoughts. So I'm curious. First of all, I also have to say I have to applaud everybody for sharing these stories because they're pretty powerful, and you're putting yourself out there. So Rahat, I'm curious your thoughts about how much of that thought spiral comes from maybe a place of fear. Does that maybe factor in for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of imposter syndrome or anything is really out of fear of like whether it's being accepted, like your thoughts being accepted as like quote unquote correct, or just the fear of like thinking that you're not good enough or to be wherever it is that you are. So yeah, I think a lot of it is definitely rooted in fear, and it's one of the harder things definitely to overcome. And I think it's really, maybe you can't tackle fear itself, but it's more like what are the things causing it that you can kind of deal with a little bit, rather than the overarching larger fear concept itself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another thing when it comes to accessibility and inclusivity. Hank, you were just saying, somebody pointed out to you your event wasn't inclusive, and you didn't put up that wall, you didn't get defensive, you didn't sort of present that fear response of, what do you mean, my thing, myself, whatever it is, wasn't good enough, but instead you were willing to be open and accepting to that feedback, and that's so important. And Alex, I think I'm kind of curious too, because obviously you're talking a lot about putting yourself out there, and I think getting beyond that, maybe that gut response of, oh no, I'm not good enough, which again is like tied into fear. So, do you want to like maybe just recap a couple of your key points about how to get beyond that gut reaction?
Yeah, sure. No, just kind of back to that, about fear, about imposter syndrome. I really feel like, yeah, our thoughts have such a high impact on us when, and we in our brains will tell us a lot of times, because our brains, evolutionarily speaking, have been taught to like avoid any sort of being cast out from the group, and it's really like dangerous for that to happen. And so our brains will tell or give us these thoughts that are like, oh my gosh, this is really bad. You're not doing a good job. You're an imposter. And the thing is, if we continue to follow these thoughts, or to kind of believe these thoughts, or even just think these thoughts, they're going to manifest as that. Like that will be our reality. And so if we can see them for what they are, and then redirect them to, okay, yes, I don't, kind of like what Rahat was saying in his talk, but like I don't know how to do this now, but I can learn to do it and then find a pattern for improving it later. Kind of from my own talk, just I think the main takeaway in terms of this is just launching yourself before you're ready. I think if you have an idea of something that you want to do, or that piques your interest or curiosity, but you don't know exactly how you're going to achieve it, don't let that stop you from just not even starting. I think the worst thing that we can do is just make 0 steps instead of just 1 step, and then 1 step, and then 1. We think we have to do it all at the same time, so like 0 to 100 steps, when that's not the case at all. You just make 1 step and then see where you are from there, and you'll probably know what you need to do to make that next step. Oh, Kimberly, I think you're muted, or from me.
I wonder if that's the first time it's happened in the conference. Probably not. I think it happened to Paul earlier today. Anyway, so I want to go to Sneha, because Sneha, you're a manager of people like I am, and I find that this is like one of those challenges that as a manager, you can't just say to people, I mean, you can say to people, just snap out of it, or like, just believe in yourself. But I mean, that can be a little bit false. Do you have any techniques that you use when you're coaching your direct reports, or just anybody in general, to help them kind of move beyond, to get them out of the box, to help them, kind of get past the imposter syndrome, or to help them get started?
Yes, I think that's a great question, Kimberly. The biggest challenge, if I see myself like 5 to 6 years back, was in giving constructive feedback to my team members, or that I would see a problem, just opening it out to them. Our goal is to solve that problem, so they're moving ahead, versus me just telling them and then they're fearing about forming a relationship with me, a healthy relationship with me, or making any progress for that matter on that problem. So coming on the same page about, okay, we see this problem, there is a either a behavioral issue or something we are both going to work towards. So I start with, okay, I am telling this story to myself, that this is a situation, right? This is a situation that I can see that as a pattern. Do you see that? So I start by forming a ground and stating facts. So I saw this, and this is a and state the mutual goal that I'm towards, and my team member is towards. So we talk in that in that language, and I'm very open, and I state that share what I should be doing more or what I should be doing less. So when I ask for feedback for myself, and it becomes much more easier to share feedback with them as well. So those are the two main things. And I feel that transparency cannot be built in like a month. It has to be built over time. So you have to create compassion with your team members. Start by asking how their family is. Start by the previous conversation. Like I start with the previous conversation I've had with them on, okay, what are the things they shared with me? What are the struggles they shared with me? And we start from that point onwards. So it's like more of, okay, she really cares or he really cares. So that kind of a thing. And then it becomes a much easier conversation about, okay, this is an issue that I'm seeing. Let's work together on fixing this. So.
Yeah, that's amazing, Sneha. I think you just put together a couple, like two key things that I've read in the past in books, right? To overcome fear, you yourself sometimes have to be vulnerable in order to create the connection with others that will kind of help get beyond that barrier. And that makes me think, Henk, about your experience, in trying to organize an event. If you're trying to make it more inclusive and you're trying to go out and find people to be part of something, maybe to join a community that they don't feel like they're part of, right? You're trying to like welcome them to the table. You're trying to find people to speak at an event when they've never done it before. What was your experience like there? How, as a meeting organizer, did you help people kind of get beyond that, where maybe you had even less of a relationship, an opportunity to build a relationship with them?
Yeah, so I mostly reach out to people by email, but some other conferences I think have a good example of that there is a buddy system, which I'm always take place in if it is there, that if you are asked to the conference, you can check a box, hey, I would like to have a mentor to practice my talk with. And I have to say those experiences for me, and I think also for the speaker, are really good because they can practice the talk, have feedback on like the technical side from me, but also like how you can present. And I think that is really valuable.
I agree. I mean, this block of sessions is kind of a case in point, and it's valuable, I think, especially because these are topics that need to be discussed. We can't ignore them, right? I mean, we're creating software, but we're creating software for other human beings, just like us, and not like us. But if we don't have those conversations, we'll never get to know the others. We miss that opportunity to learn more about ourselves. So I think that's really key. And I want to point out that question came in from Ralph Apon, so kind of modified it a bit, but thank you for that. I want to, sorry, I'm looking at my other screen where I've got some questions written down. I want to jump back to Rahat for a second, because Ravi Mota has asked, how do you break that fear barrier, and are there actual tools? And I think that's where you were coming from, saying CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is sort of that mechanism, or can be one mechanism. And I'll put it out there too. I've done CBT for anxiety, and it's incredibly useful. You do condition yourself to learn over time sort of what your triggers are and things like that. But Rahat, are there other things that you would sort of put out there beyond somebody immediately going and starting CBT right now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is going to be, well, trial and error, figuring out what works for you. I think I mentioned in like the talk is like, there's no like one size fits all kind of solution. CBT is useful for some people. For some folks, I know there's like newer types of therapy called like acceptance and commitment therapy. It's another thing that you can take a look at. But I think overall, it's like kind of exploring, what helps you in those situations. For me, like I added a bunch of things to the CBT stuff that I was doing, because like CBT in general kind of only gives you that framework of like, this is what you need to do to go overcome this. But the whole thing of like keeping track of my wins, keeping track of like different, you know, achievements that I've made, that's like an addition that I made to my own CBT. So like finding things like that you think are helpful for you. For me, it was just like kind of finding that positive reinforcement that I might not always think about in those situations, and like jotting those down in notes or like on the Twitter feed that I had done, is like different things that you can do like while you're in a good space, so that to prepare yourself and give yourself tools for like when you do go into that sort of like negative space to help you get out of it.
Yeah, it's super important. Certainly do that in the good times. I don't know, Sneha, about you. I'm kind of an advocate just for keeping a general diary anyway. I encourage new developers to just keep track of the successes and also the failures, because especially the failures, you'll notice how you come back to them, but in different ways. And because it's a resource that's just for you, it hopefully lessens that sort of anxiety level, and helps you to identify the patterns in that. I have a question that I want to ask both of Rahat and Alex. I'm going to, Rahat, just stay with you for a second. And, again, thank you for being so open and for sharing your experience. Again, I'm like speaking for myself and maybe for Sneha here and maybe others in the audience. As a manager, right? I want to know, if I were your manager, what could I do for you? Or what are you looking for, from your current manager? Or if you're looking for a new job, what is it that you need, or what would you like to have in terms of support, understanding, that would help you more easily break out of that, that negative cycle of thinking?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that I had mentioned before is like, just showing that you care is definitely a start. It's just like, asking about, even like what's up outside of work or anything like that. One thing one of my managers had done with me that was really helpful was like, she would kind of, a lot of this stuff that I was doing, she would like write down a lot of my own achievements, like with me and for me, and kind of like during a lot of these like performance reviews, she'd bring them up, and like some like it was almost like she was kind of doing some of the CBT practices for me, of like reminding me of different things, of stuff that I might have done that was awesome, if I'm like not feeling like you know just I'm not doing enough, or I'm not getting to where I want to be, or having some issues in my overall career progression. So like really just being involved and like caring about the journey, I think is one of the biggest things that can help um, people. Like that's my favorite managers have all like been kind of on the journey with me, and like experiencing it with me, and like talking through it with me, and like helping me through that progression, versus just like asking sort of what's wrong, okay, try this or try that, and that's kind of like it. So really being, I guess, like immersed in that experience is really helpful.
Yeah. Be a real person and have a real relationship.
Yeah.
Sounds like, but I mean, that's not always easy. So, well, I appreciate your thoughts. And Alex, same question to you. What is it that you want out of a manager? What do you want a manager to know about how best to help you, keep you encouraged, keep you motivated, and support you in your growth?
Yeah, same. I second totally what Rahat said. I think also it's really important just to, in general, I think cultivate overall a culture of psychological safety. So not necessarily something direct that a manager does, but just small things in general that the team does, that just showing kindness and defaulting to kindness and defaulting to, everyone has good intentions, and there's no silly questions that you can ask. I know for me, especially, I'm really going through a time where I'm kind of overcoming this mental block of asking questions, and I'm kind of trying to switch my mindset to more of like, okay, asking questions means that I'm learning and I'm progressing. Like the more questions I ask, the quicker I learn, the more I learn. Because before I feel like I think this can be true of any kind of high achieving person, or really a person who kind of has a lot of grit or like wants to achieve things by themselves. And you don't always want to ask questions. You don't always want to come off as seeming like you don't know something. But it's been really interesting for me to flip that on its head a little bit and to tell myself more than anything, it's not necessarily something that I think a manager can do, but maybe by fostering this culture of psychological safety and defaulting to kindness and encouraging maybe noisiness and slack and asking questions and that kind of thing. And I think just in overall, I think giving direct reports a lot of autonomy and trust, and then I'm such a big fan of feedback in any form, constructive feedback. I really feel that it's such a good opportunity for improving and just kind of seeing our blind spots that maybe we weren't aware of before and being able to consciously and concretely act on those.
That's great. Thank you. And so I'm going to be a little honest here because I missed the last 10 minutes of Sneha's talk because we were prepping for this. So I missed the end. But I have to say, I agree with your talk, right? We do kind of create that box and we kind of put ourselves in that situation. Our thoughts do kind of create our reality. And yet at the same time, when somebody says that to me and, at the start of your talk, I still had that initial, like, it's not right, like, no, like other people can really bother you. Which is only to say, I'm connecting that to Alex, what you were just saying, right, about treating people with kindness. Sometimes you have to also treat yourself with kindness. And like in that principle of the box, Sneha, like, how do you address it and also treat yourself kindly so that you're not beating yourself up for creating your box?
Wonderful question. I think that's really, that's a fact. I mean, when we are analyzing ourselves stuck in a box, or when we are analyzing whether we are in the box, I think the first step in situations like that where we are really disliking that someone is like getting nosy, or I'll just make an example here. We really have to see how, like, come up with facts, as in, okay, what is the situation, right, at hand? Am I dealing with facts here? Am I cooking stories in my mind? Am I talking really facts here? And have I reached to somebody neutral and maybe talked about that situation? Have I, am I, when I'm judging somebody, or when I'm thinking about somebody in a negative manner, is it facts? Is it driven by facts? Or is it something that is a characteristic of that I'm driving my judgment, basing my judgment out of? So think about those situations. Am I looking at like patterns, things like that? So it is all very fact driven. That really helps me understand whether I am, is it like a story that I'm cooking, or is it something that really needs addressing? And if it is something that needs addressing, talk transparently with that person. I mean, of course, if you feel like that you really want to invest in that relationship with that person, I would say talk transparently that, okay, these are the things, this is what is going in the back of my mind. Let's talk about it. Because even if you talk or don't talk about it, that person can sense it. And that's the whole, that's the whole phenomena. I mean, we are all in the human world. Even if we don't say a word, people really sense how we feel about them on the inside. So the better thing is just talk it out in a way that you really want to invest in that relationship, and it will simply plainly work. So that's what I do.
That's great. And speaking of investing in relationships, I know, Sneha, that you are one of the contributors to the Grace Hopper celebration. Grace, the full name, the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing, as put on by the Anita Borg Institute. So this is something near and dear to my heart, and I'm bringing it up because, you know, I want to be inclusive, and for anybody who's not familiar with this conference, go look it up. ghc.org is the URL. The Grace Hopper Celebration for Women in Computing is probably exactly what it sounds like to you. It is the premier conference, worldwide conference, that brings together women in computing. It literally was founded in a ladies' restroom at a tech conference back in the 80s. I used to be involved in it. I know Sneha's involved in it right now. But when you're talking about inclusivity, I think that's a great example of a conference that, you know, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the people you want to attract. And Henk, I'm going to come back to you in a second to find out what you've had to do. But for example, Grace Hopper, as it's just commonly called, or GHC, has had to, you know, organize childcare, because how are you going to get together a large group of women, most of whom who probably have kids and probably need to bring them with them to the conference, especially if they're very young. They have to organize daycare for the conference, and that's just become a feature of it. And now I know other conferences do the same. But Henk, is there anything that you've done or modified, you know, learned from having to put together events, and has that carried over into, you know, your regular work, you know, your work on the cloud?
Yeah, I think over time we changed a lot. I think the first thing we did was actually make the organizers team more diverse. So the first set of people that we got into the conferences, I do more than one conference. I organize multiple conferences. So we kind of diversified all those groups organizing. And then you come indeed up with things like childcare. I never thought of it. I have 3 children. I never thought about childcare, that was something you could offer. We offered that at DUGFest 19. And there was childcare for everyone who wanted to use it. And so all those small things come. We experimented with sign language. That was the latest thing we actually added to the conferences, and then we talked about how we can actually make it better, what we should do. Accessible venues. You always have to look in that, because we organize also a lot of user groups. Like every month we went to a venue, and some venues were just inaccessible, and that was also not good. So by organizing more and more events, every time you learn, or at least I learn, and you add those things to the agenda, you look at it, and it becomes like this second nature. And I'm almost at the stage that I just don't think about some things anymore. Like, oh, is it accessible? Oh, are the captions? Oh, is this there? Oh, we should have childcare. So I think that is how I look at it.
That's amazing, and that's such a great note to wrap things up on, because again, we're all human, we're all learning, we're all growing, we're all trying to be of service to one another, and through that process we're going to make mistakes, but we'll do better the next time. And if we can just be compassionate, right, and help one another along the way, then, well, we'll make a better world, and hopefully we'll make some better products, and the internet won't crash. Right. So I want to thank all of you for being panelists. This is all the time we have, unfortunately. It's the final unconference session of Codegarden 2021. There have been great sessions for the past 2 days. And if you didn't get to see them all, there will be videos available soon. So thanks to everyone for attending, and don't go away, because the after show is coming up next.